There she is. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bitchuation Room podcast live stream. So excited to have y'all here on another Tuesday, Valentine's Day. Are we still doing this? Is this still a thing? Isn't it all a Hallmark invention? Love, I mean, relationships. Not me. No, I'm a lone wolf. That's not the term. I'm a rambling woman, as they say. No, I rambled right into a heterosexual relationship with a man and have a child. Place where no one's gone before. So I wanted everyone to know that. And we're going to do something very brave this Valentine's Day and cook dinner. So, welcome everybody. I hope you're having a great day. I hope if you're listening from the future that you got laid. You know what I'm saying? Let's be real. We're going to talk about that later in the show on how people are not having sex. Why is that? And how are we going to fix it in 90 minutes or less? Super excited to have comedian Eliza Skinner with me joining once again. It's been a couple of years. We're going to talk about AOC throwing down in the House Oversight Committee. We're going to talk about the Ohio derailment, arguably a lot less cool, but just as fiery. Sorry, that's bad. That's a bad thing to say. And then it's almost been a year since Russia invaded Ukraine. Yay! So I wanted to hear from journalist Branko Marcetic, contributor to Jacobin, many other awesome outlets. He's going to be joining me. What's going on? How the hell do we get out of this? And by we, I mean they, but also we, because the United States has poured a lot of money. And you know what? If we can't get health care, at least could we get some sort of diplomatic settlement in that region? Anyway, if you're here, if you're listening, obviously 5 stars on iTunes helps people discover this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And I just wanted to read some very, very sweet reviews. This is what you get, y'all. This is what you get. You get my undying love. You shill for me, I shill right back. Keemish Squeamish says, funny and smart. I'm not sure what to write first. She's really both. Thank you. Dubdin says, Amazeballs. She's amazing. Best way to start off my Wednesday mornings. A great interviewer as well. A real treasure. Thank you guys so much. Anyone, you can also write a review. It's very simple. It's like, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the stars. Give them to me and I will give you my love. Also, we have bonus content for all the patrons. Patreon.com/bitchuationroom. You know where to go to get an extra 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes of content. $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month gets you a shout out during the fart song. If you don't know what that means, you will very soon. Although, to be honest, we don't have any new $10 patrons, so it might be a little embarrassing for your old gal here. You get a lot of other perks, 20% off of merchandise. If you want to give a one-time donation, though, TBR-Live on Venmo, TBR Live on Cash App. I appreciate all of that. Just FYI, the benefits for the patrons is going to drastically improve. And I don't want to give it away, but it's very exciting and I'm looking forward to it. So that's coming down in March. So get in now. And hell yeah. But with all that, guys, get your big caps on. I can speak today. This is what it is. What are you bitching about? Full disclosure, I am number 52 in line to buy Beyonce tickets. Don't judge me, internet. No, I'm not going to spend thousands of dollars. Maybe oh my God, there's one person ahead of me. You guys, hang on. I have to do this. Fuck. You know what? This was a bad idea. This whole thing was a very bad idea. I should have got my husband to do this for me, but he was putting down the baby and I wanted to celebrate that. But like, you know what I'm saying? Now I very much regret my decision and I don't know what to do right now. All right, just give me anything that's like, yo, what are we working with? How much? Like 200? 300? Fuck you guys. All right. While this populates, I'm bitching about Ticketmaster and the fact that I'm even doing this right now, and the fact that I first of all become a patron so I can get better tickets. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. That's a terrible reason. That's a terrible reason. Me supporting a billionaire like Beyonce, who's just probably the greatest talent of our lifetimes and ever, then it's incredible that we're like gracing the earth at the same time that she's also on earth. Yes, I am a stan. But no, I'm bitching about something very, okay, here we go. Something very silly that I saw. And I was like, you're fucking kidding me. Turns out no place is safe from sexual harassment. In fact, female scientists in Antarctica say that Antarctica is a sexual harassment hellscape. That's right. It's not enough that it's melting. It's not enough that all kinds of anthraxian permafrost viruses are being released. It's not enough that we vie over the freshwater resources and the rights to Antarctica and that they will be the cause of World Wars 5 through 7. But no, men will whip out their dicks. That's right. Yes, men will be disgusting no matter where you go. You can go to the literal ends of the earth, and this is what's going to happen to you. So here we are, women in STEM being sexually harassed. 95% of women interviewed in focus groups knew someone who had experienced assault or harassment within the Antarctic program. To outsiders, the graphic detail and matter-of-fact descriptions were shocking, but in the polar science community, the reaction was different. No one was surprised. Yeah. Like, these are the people who are going to save the polar bears? Really? Sir, you're going to get frostbite on that. Like, it's so ridiculous. You can't, and again, like, look, it happens in comedy. It happens in every single goddamn industry. It is a boys' club. And of course, being at the ends of the earth is no exception. There is one disgusting detail here. The station culture, this is an Antarctic station, I believe, is complex and opaque. She said, certain dorms and lounges have reputations, and for a newcomer, it's hard to know which you want to be in and which you want to stay away from. In this report, one interviewee said she'd been told on her first day at McMurdo, which is a terrible name. It sounds like murders happen there, but you want it to sound cute. So you're like, McMurdo. To stay clear of a certain building unless she wanted to be raped. Another woman said she felt like she was seen as prey no matter where she was physically on the base. Men, especially on the left, love to fucking Margaret Thatcher me. They love to be like, okay, but like you had like one cunt. Like, yeah, we know. We know. Okay, but Madeleine Albright. Yeah. Every day, y'all fuck up. Every day you're given the opportunity to not be a predator. And every day men fail. And this location is no exception. And I hope their dicks freeze off. And that's all I want to say about that. And yay for women in STEM. My baby has a big ass brain, and I think she's going to be a smart child, because that is apparently how it does work. If you have a big head, you might be smart. And I want her to be a woman in STEM. I don't want her to have to be a podcaster. You know what I'm saying? Even though she would be a Nepo baby podcaster. But anywho, let me bring into the Bitchuation room, the physical room, the virtual room, comedian, head writer of Earth to Net on Disney Plus. And in 2020, you might have caught her live comedy album, Regarding My Lovers, Eliza Skinner.
Eliza. Hello. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm like, I don't know, slowly freaking out about getting tickets. This is the dumbest idea ever.
Where are you now?
I can buy them right now.
All right, buy them.
I guess so, but do you want to just vamp about like what you're
sure? You know what? I can, as far as women in STEM being victims of sexual abuse, they're also sometimes sexual abusers while being victims of sexual abuse. Are you familiar with the case of sexual harassment against Coco the gorilla?
I remember Coco. This is not Coco and Harambe are different, right?
No,
Who's
Coco the gorilla was the gorilla who spoke sign language, and
Yes.
there are lots of videos of Coco meeting celebrities, Robin Williams, Mr. Rogers, I think. She had a little kitten that she named All Ball. But I think she's mostly a hoax. I don't think that she could actually speak sign language. I think that it was just like most animal communication attempts. It's them learning a response to like, hey, I do this and it makes you do that, like dog training, like anything.
Coco, I found out, only could say, like, after all this training, finally, I believe it was Coco could say one sentence, which was like, "You banana, give me banana."
I don't know, but if you look her up, you can find a lot of videos of her speaking in sign language, and her handler, Francine Patterson, would sort of translate what she was saying, and very often it would be it's if you watch it, you're like, this is not actually happening. But one of the things that often happened, apparently, was Coco would sign something to Francine and her assistants and
Team
be
of
like,
team of grifters, of
well, no,
liars.
her female assistants, women in STEM and science, and Francine would be like, oh yeah, Coco would like to see your nipples. Coco's interested in seeing your nipples. Take your shirts off. And they would be like, what? And she'd be like, yeah, Coco wants it. She's a gorilla. She wants to see what yours are like. So take off your shirts. And eventually these women sued Coco and Francine for sexual harassment. There's just no end, is what I'm saying. There's no end.
So you're saying it's Margaret Thatcher, Madeleine Albright, and Francine. What's her last name?
Patterson. No, I'm saying that women are the idea that women are for sex and can be and sexual things can be demanded of them has so permeated our culture that even gorillas are affected by that messaging.
Well, Coco was a female.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the through line
There's
for
so
all of
many
this
questions.
is who's being victimized.
Right. It's still women in STEM, no matter what. You got to show your nips if you want to get close to the gorilla.
Yeah. It's like, oh, so I hear you got a doctorate, but what do your nipples look like? Like, okay,
God, that's
weirdos.
Is that I fucking love that story. So that is so funny.
Yeah,
I think maybe I'm thinking of Nim Chimpsky, who's the other gorilla who was like very, very close. Wasn't a chimp, in fact, but close to like the signing and speaking. Eliza, what are you bitching about today beyond, having to show, go topless for the apes?
I can I say the fervor around Penn Badgley putting up some restrictions on his own career?
I don't Googling right now. Yeah,
okay.
Talk
Penn
about
Badgley, who is the star of You on Netflix, the sexy stalker show, which great concept. But not like I don't watch it. I watch it, but still, it's problematic concept. But he came out and said that he did not want to do explicit sex scenes on the show anymore. And I guess he talked about it on his podcast. And I've seen people up in arms about it, and they're like, "Oh, so so have fun with Candace Cameron and Kirk Cameron. Wow, what a prude. Wow, it's just it. So you can't do your job." And like people all across the political and cultural spectrum are saying this, and I think it's so weird and so indicative of this thing that we have a hard time, I think, as a culture now, differentiating between what is political and what is not.
Yes.
Like you can, as an individual, make decisions about how you want to live your life and how you want to have the expectations that you want placed on you at work that you will accept. And like you could say that. You can just be like, "Hey, I'm not going to do that anymore." You can be like, "Hey, you know what? I'm not going to eat carrots anymore."
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're saying, and no one in the whole world should eat carrots. And if you do, it means you're a dirty slut. Like this guy just said, I don't want to have to take my clothes off and be sexual at work anymore. I've done it a whole lot. I don't want to do that anymore.
I just think it's interesting that it's a man standing up and saying that, after I think an industry where women have felt pressured to do that, there's so many liberties that have been taken. They feel like their careers are on the line. And it's kind of like, I mean, I say this actually with a lot of respect for him and his decision. Like, women sometimes do need to, for lack of a better term, but like lean in a little bit, like kind of like just think with, your invisible, like dick or whatever, like your big dick energy that you don't have. And it's the same thing with imposter syndrome. It's like, just, okay, go into this job like a dude. What would a dude think? Not going to second guess, just go do it. Like, and in this case, I don't want to do these sex scenes anymore. It's not part of what I want to do. And the show's a hit from what I've heard.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like he needs
he's
it.
still having a bunch of sex on the show. It's just all clothed sex now, which I think kind of makes it hornier, because every time they're like, we can't even take our clothes off. Put your stuff inside of my stuff right now. It's like, we got to do it right away. Like, all right. So
it's just like a 10-minute rubbing scene. You're like, yes.
They're just like humping, or there's like blankets in their bed and stuff. And the people who make the show didn't have any problem with it. He says that the showrunner was really down with it. So I found it so strange that anyone outside of that equation has latched onto it as much as I have seen people latching onto it on Twitter. Like, it's just some guy who doesn't want to fuck at work anymore.
Yeah.
So
the amount of things that we feel like actors owe us is just wild.
Yeah. And as I said, the amount of things that we think are commentaries on us, I think just in general about someone else's decisions about their life, we think there's like an implicit like, oh, so you think I'm gross for watching it? Oh,
Right.
so you think I'm weird because that wouldn't bother me, or like whatever. It's like, this is this person's personal life.
Right.
He can do that. It's okay.
Penn Badgley doesn't owe you anything, even though I thought Penn Badgley was like a luxury brand, because it sounds like another luxury brand. But Penn, thank you for standing up. That's a good thing to bitch about. Not everything is political. Not everything has to do with you, and you don't always need an opinion about everything. And I say this as someone who's got an opinion about pretty much everything. But let's move on to what happened in this week. Because I have a child, I was not able to write just banger monologue jokes about the week, but we've been shooting down objects that might be aliens. Joe Biden gave a speech, and Dianne Feinstein is retiring.
About this alien thing,
please.
They're UFOs. Like, we are so glossing over the definition of UFO. It just means unidentified flying object.
It means anal experiments. That's what it means. I choose to believe.
From when they were like, oh, we're declassifying all the UFO stuff. I have so many people in my life who are like, so you heard about how we do have aliens around all the time? And I'm like, no, we don't. And they're like, well, no, the government has said there are UFOs. And I'm like, none of those letters stand for ET. They just are like, we don't know what that was.
There's just a lot of debris.
We don't know. We have not identified it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the sky. One of them was like a octagon. That seems kind of cool. I just hope they're not like
an alien shape, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, never mind. I take it back.
What I love how we just like, oh, octagon, that's too many sides, dude. That's definitely an alien.
That's alien technology. I don't think we've even humans haven't gone past 7 sides. So
no, exactly. We got the Pentagon and that's it. You got more than that. Whoa, bow down. Fucking you could do any experiments you want. But
they're already doing plenty in the Pentagon, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. No, they are. They are though. Sure. I would like to believe there's like a little, sort of American Dad like alien like hanging around the Pentagon
with lots of wigs.
With lots of wigs. Well, let's get into it. This was the week where one of the first hearings under the newly Republican-led Congress has been about the Hunter Biden story and whether or not his laptop holding secret information about whether or not that was suppressed by the company Twitter back when it wasn't owned by the richest man on earth. And yes, this is the priority under Republican leadership for these committees. And that committee, one of the committees is the House Oversight Committee. And they're digging deep, y'all. And actually, there is someone on that committee who, thank God, is bringing us back down to earth. And that is Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who basically effortlessly just crucified this attempt at like pure partisanship politics, pure like big tech is, suppressing my voice, et cetera, all the bullshit that Republicans are talking about. She crucified it in this, in her statement here, in her line of questioning. And I just want to play some of it. We'll stop down, Eliza, and talk about it occasionally. But here she is starting off AOC.
Right here at the top here, this isn't even my line of questioning, but I'd like to submit to the record a Washington Post article now warning about Hunter Biden laptop disinformation, the guy who leaked it. Here's the deal. Before I even get into my questions, I think that the story here with the Washington Post reporting is that what they're saying right here, when the New York Post first reported in October 2020 that it had obtained contents of a laptop computer allegedly owned by Joe Biden's son Hunter, there was an immediate roadblock faced by other news outlets that hoped to corroborate reporting, as many did. The newspaper wasn't sharing what it obtained. New York Post had this alleged information and was trying to publish it without any corroboration, without any backup information. They were trying to publish it to Twitter. Twitter did not let them, and now they were upset. I believe that political operatives who sought to inject explosive disinformation with the Washington Post couldn't get away with it. And now they're livid. And they want the ability to do it again. They want the ability to inject this again. So they've dragged a social media platform here in Congress. They're weaponizing the use of this committee so that they can do it again. A whole hearing about a 24-hour hiccup in a right-wing political operation. That is why we are here right now.
A whole hearing about a 24-hour hiccup in a right-wing political operation. That line is brilliant. So here she is, the preamble to her line of questioning, which is effectively entering into the record this Washington Post article, not to be confused with the New York Post, the one who originally had this story, to say the reason there was this hold on the story was because no other news outlet could corroborate it. No one else was like, okay, so they held it for a moment, and then it was published anyway. And then people jumped onto it. I don't know if it's now or later, but we all know that like the guy who was repairing the laptop was like, yeah, this is a non-story. This is nothing. This doesn't exist. This, and like I've seen his dick, not that amazing. All right, well let me continue to play.
And it's just an abuse of public resources, an abuse of public time. We could be talking about healthcare. We could be talking about bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. We could be talking about abortion rights, civil rights, voting rights. But instead, we're talking about Hunter Biden's half-fake laptop story. I mean, this is an embarrassment. But I'll go into it. Ms. Navarrete, let's talk about something real. I'd like to show you a tweet posted by former President Trump about my colleagues and I on July 14, 2019. It says in part, quote, "Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how it's done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy as quickly to work out free travel arrangements." A day or two after that, Donald Trump publicly incited, violence at a rally, targeting 4 congresswomen, including myself, saying, "Go back to where you came from." Ms. Navarrete, as I understand it, you were the most senior member of Twitter's content moderation team, or a senior member of Twitter's content moderation team when this was posted. As part of your responsibilities, did you review this tweet?
Yes, it was my team's responsibility to review these tweets.
And what did you conclude?
My team made the recommendation that for the first time, we find Donald Trump in violation of Twitter's policies and use the public interest interstitial.
For the first time?
Yes.
And at the time, Twitter's policy included a specific example when it came to banned abuse against immigrants as they specifically included the phrase, go back to your country or go back to where you came from, correct?
Yes, that was specifically included in the content moderation guidance as an example.
You brought this up to the Vice President of Trust and Safety, Del Harvey, correct?
I did, yes.
And she overrode your assessment, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And something interesting happened after she overrode your assessment. A day or two later, Twitter seemed to have changed their policies, didn't they?
Yes, that trope, go back to where you came from, was removed from the content moderation guidance as an example.
So Twitter changed their own policy after the president violated it in order to potentially accommodate his tweet?
Yes.
Thank you.
There we go. So that is just so perfect. Just a set them up, knock them down example of how Twitter, first of all, this is 2019, y'all. You think Donald Trump wasn't inciting violence and through his rhetoric before 2019 on Twitter? So it took that tweet of go back to where you came from to be the straw that broke the camel's back. And what happened? She recommends, hey, you should take this down because it violates our policies of saying go back to where you came from. So her supervisor said, nope, it doesn't. And then a couple days later, fucking changed the policy. The right has a victim complex that is absolutely not real. I mean, it's so clear. Eliza, I don't know if you remember that moment where he said that go back to where you came from, that whole shebang.
I don't, but I mean, I saw this, and he said so many fucked up things. It's just, I think that we have crossed over into a world where politics and the news are just Sports Center now. It's just like WWF. It's like pick a team and root for it. Don't care about actual policies, actual news items and events that don't have to do with politicians. It's not going to get us anywhere, but I don't see any way to change it. It's sorry.
No, yeah, and what sucks is that this is, social media is, very, I would say I could characterize it naively as like a conduit for those political teams, and that kind of thing. And it's supposed to, Twitter is ideally supposed to keep people safe, not just completely allow stories that are false.
These are policies that should benefit everybody.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, well, that's some woke left policy. Like, no, these are just policies that, if applied to everyone, make everybody's experience a little bit more streamlined, but they all get attributed to one side or another, and then everything is a point for some team.
Exactly. Rather than like, hey, how about helping we don't do everybody death threats all around? But that's, of course, that's like when you're actually, the other side is good faith. The other side cares about keeping people safe. And AOC ends this hearing in her time speaking more specifically about an account that has been allowed to thrive and exist on the current Twitter. Here we go.
So much for bias against right wing on Twitter. Additionally, Ms. Navaroli, are you familiar with the account Libs of TikTok?
I have heard of it from the news, yes.
Mr. Roth, are you familiar with this account?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Are you aware that from August 11th to August 16th, that account posted false information about Boston Children's Hospital, claiming that they were providing hysterectomies to children?
Yes, I am aware of that and other claims from the account.
And are you aware that this lie was then circulated by other prominent far-right influencers?
Yes.
And are you aware that all these claims, which I have reiterated were false, culminated in a real-life harassment and ultimately a bomb threat to the Boston Children's Hospital?
Yes, I am aware.
And this account is still on that platform today, isn't it?
Regrettably, yes, it is.
Despite inspiring a bomb threat due to the right-wing incitement of violence against trans Americans in this country, because they cannot let go of this obsession with fixating violence and inciting violence against trans and LGBT people, in addition to immigrants, in addition to women of color, This is a party that cannot pick on anyone their own size. And they are trying to co-opt an entire social media platform and use the power of this committee and of Congress in order to pursue a political agenda.
So it's just so perfectly crystal clear the way she puts it. And I just want to say those two tweets, the incitement of violence now and the incitement of violence then, they were under different Twitter leadership, right? Jack was in charge of Twitter, or not Jack, but whatever. Jack squared, the new Jack. And remember, Trump didn't get kicked off of Twitter until when? Until the Capitol riots, until the insurrection on January 6th. Because you take down that tweet that's like, go back to where you came from, it'll keep people safe. But man, your engagement is going to go down. And who wants that? We want more engagement.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of what I was saying, that a policy like no lies presented as facts on this website is a policy that protects everybody. It shouldn't have to be a politicized one side versus the other type of thing. Like, that makes everybody safer. But people have chosen to support making themselves less safe to try to make a cudgel out of these things to hurt someone else.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Because when your bread and butter is lies, then you don't want to have fact checkers. Then you don't want to have any intermediaries. And meanwhile, Elon Musk sitting with Rupert Murdoch at the Super Bowl. Kill yourselves. All right. We got to move on to an arguably, again, less fun story, but very juicy. A lot went down. So this was the week where a train burst into flames after a derailment in the small town of 5,000 people in East Palestine, Ohio, or I believe it might be East Palestine.
That's how people seem to be saying it.
Palestine, yeah. Palestine, whatever, free them both. It's an 150-car train, and it burst into 100-foot flames with all kinds of chemicals, including vinyl chloride and other things I can't pronounce, something called phosgene, which is a toxic gas that can cause vomiting and breathing trouble. Obviously, the derailment created new gases. And here you can see a little bit of the footage from that explosion. There you go, right there. Just a fireball straight up in the air in this sleepy little town outside of Pittsburgh. And about 25 million Americans live within an oil train blast zone. I don't know if this one or just generally, like, in the United States, 25 million people live within an oil blast zone, an oil train blast zone. And let's see. Okay, more about what exactly happened. Might be all the chemicals. 4.5 million tons of chemicals are shipped by rail each year. An average of 12,000 rail cars carrying hazardous materials pass through cities and towns each day. This is more broadly. Now, this region in particular is super ripe for these kinds of derailments because the Pittsburgh region alone has seen 8 train derailments over the last 5 years. It's a hub here. And there are about 1,700 annual derailments that occur nationally. The causes of the Pittsburgh accidents highlight the myriad of ways in which things can go wrong. A crack in a track ignored by rail companies caused a 2018 derailment, while another train hit a dump truck at a crossing with an inadequate safety equipment. A broken axle on a car train is thought to be the source of the East Palestine accident. So that is what happened. That axle broke. What's been the fallout? Residents have been told they should just open the doors and windows and air out their homes. They have not been offered another place to stay.
Open your doors and windows, so if there's anything gross outside, it could come right on in.
Yeah.
Get that air in your house.
Absolutely. They've not been provided with alternative housing or, let's say, bottled water or any kind of assistance. It's just like, I mean, there's only 5,000 of you. And ironically, y'all, I don't know if anyone heard of or saw the Netflix film White Noise. White Noise is literally about the town of East Palestine, or a town very similar to it, to the point where they filmed there. They filmed this movie in East Palestine, and it is about a train derailment spilling toxic chemicals. So little bit on the nose. People who were in the blast zone were actually extras on that film. And now it's all coming true. Yeah.
But if you would like to watch a good movie that is related to this this situation, I would recommend Dark Waters, which is also a movie about chemical destruction of our environment and using just being horrible, corporate chemical horribleness, and the way that it's covered up.
Dark Waters. Ooh, I need to see. So it's not a Noah Baumbach film.
It's not a Noah Baumbach film. No, it's a Mark Ruffalo and Todd Haynes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was about DuPont and all the Teflon cover up shit and all of the disgusting things that they did to animals and people by covering it up.
And I'm sure it stopped it, right? Once that film came out, they DuPont was like,
yeah,
oh,
totally.
God.
Yeah. And similar chemicals too. Similar like these poly chloro whatevers that like change also when they interact with water and with different things in our environment. So they can say like it's not that bad when it's inside of a train car, and then it becomes a completely different chemical once it's on fire and in the air and interacting with other atoms.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
So the fallout is something that we're going to get more information about. And this was over a week ago that this derailment happened. We're going to find out more about, people's livelihoods and lives and maybe not even for months or years or decades. And we shall see. But I'm always curious about the political side to things, sadly, or whatever, because I have to say there's someone at fucking fault. Otherwise, I feel crazy. And when so-called tragedies like this happen over and over and over again, you probably are going to bet that there's some bullshit happening behind the scenes. And there, lo and behold, is. So it turns out that Northern Suffolk, which is the rail company, has been lobbying Congress consistently for years to refrain from putting regulations on their trains that are carrying these kinds of toxic chemicals, specifically regulations around their braking system. So let's learn more about that. This is an article from The Lever that did some great reporting. Norfolk Southern train derailment prompted emergency evacuations before this weekend's fiery derailment. The company helped kill a federal safety rule aimed at upgrading the rail industry's Civil War era braking systems. Let's talk about the old brakes. A vast majority of the nation's trains continue to rely on a braking system first developed in 1868. Trains equipped with these traditional air brakes, exactly, they make emergency stops more slowly with higher rates of damage than the trains equipped with ECP brakes, according to both safety advocates and Federal Railroad Administration. So ECP brakes, while air brakes stop the trains individually as air pressure moves sequentially from one car to the next, ECP brakes operate using an electronic signal that can stop an entire train much faster. As one railroad insider told the Washington Post, and I love this quote, they told them anonymously, trains are like giant slinkies. When you have the back of the train running into the front of the train, they can actually push cars out because cause a derailment and cause a hell of a mess. So that's the brake technology. Now, why were they resistant? What happened? Well, amid a lobbying blitz against stronger transportation safety regulations, Norfolk Southern paid executives millions and spent billions on stock buybacks, all while the company shed thousands of employees despite warnings that understaffing is intensifying safety risks. Norfolk Southern officials also fought off a shareholder initiative that could have required companies to assess, review, and mitigate risks of hazardous material transportation. So that's from their own shareholders, and that's what they were doing around what they ultimately did, which was lobby regulators in government to kill provisions requiring rail cars carrying hazardous flammable materials to be equipped with those ECPs, those electronic braking systems, to stop trains more quickly than conventional air brakes. Norfolk Southern had previously touted the new technology, known as ECP brakes, for its potential to reduce train stopping distances as much as 60% over conventional air brake systems. So we're going to just talk about the fact that we can do this. We're going to tout it, roll it out, but we're not going to actually invest in putting those brakes on our trains, nor upgrading any of the railways. And also at the same time, shedding employees and being one of the few rail barons right now that has been actively lobbying Congress to also preemptively break the strikes of rail workers. And it happened just before fucking Christmas. And this is exactly what those rail workers have been saying, which is like, yo, corners are being cut. I mean, yes, I don't have any paid sick leave, so I'm operating these trains with toxic chemicals with a flu or COVID or whatever, but also more broadly, it's very unsafe.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like when you said I look for the political thing. Like for me, I feel like I tend to look for the what is the labor issue happening
Right.
here,
Yeah.
and I feel like that it's no coincidence that this happened right after this strike got broke, which happened within months of all of this airline shit with like Southwest and
God.
everything. All of these industries were getting so the people at the top need to be making so much more money than the people at the bottom, that we're getting fewer and fewer employees. And it becomes this message of like, well, if we spent more money on making things safer and on hiring more people and giving people enough time to rest, we would have to charge people more because we couldn't make as much money for who? For the people at the top who need to be making more. I think that there needs to be like a percentage cap on how much more the heads of corporations can be making than the least paid employee.
Absolutely.
Like you can't do that. And once again, the way that I feel like this is being discussed in the media, it's already becoming part of this football game of like, whose fault is it? Is it the right or the left? Is it Pete Buttigieg's fault or not?
Right.
When like these are things that would make everybody safe. Making sure that the railroads are safe helps everybody. It should not be a political like battle. It should just be like, how do we
But this is, I mean, this is late stage capitalism. This is everyone.
There's no point to our country anymore.
No.
I think the whole point of having a country is culling our resources so that we can distribute them well enough that we all get to be safe and healthy. And that is absolutely not what's happening anymore. It's like, what's the point of having the country?
No,
what are we doing here?
and arguably, this is what libertarians will say. They're like, well, we don't need a country because Norfolk Southern is going to go down because this is going to look real bad on their record, and then no one's going to buy from them.
Just like BP went down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Remember that spill? No one ever heard of them.
happens.
It's like, what the fuck are you talking? Exactly. No, we are run by corporations. They run roughshod over our lives. They do whatever they want with them. And that fix you just mentioned is such a brilliant fix. You don't have to talk about dollars. You don't have to talk about wage. You just say you can't make more than, 5 times as much or 10 times as much. What is it now? It's like 80 times as much.
At least. And if you have like, if you're so greedy and you're like, I want my company making more and more money, fine, great. You spend that on benefits that will benefit everybody there.
Yeah.
You want to buy a jet ski? How about everybody gets their percentage of a jet ski? I don't know. Okay. I'm a comedian, but I'm just saying there has to be a way to like protect and benefit everybody.
Absolutely.
It's
a broken contract. I mean, what you're speaking to is the fact that there is no benefit to living in this country or like anymore. When we are constantly being told that like this is the price, your contaminated water, your children with cancer, that's the price for freedom.
I'm almost on the verge of feeling bad for billionaires because I'm like, you're just evil monster people now.
Yeah.
If your brains are rotten. It's like we've become Skeksis and whatever those other creatures are in the Black Crystal, where the creatures split into like good and evil.
Ooh.
Like,
I got to go back and watch that. But I want to shout out Urban Hermit on Patreon, who's watching and says, a broken axle is a convenient alibi for an antiquated brake system. Perfect. Exactly. The Lac Mégantic Quebec derailment 10 years ago destroyed half a town with 74 deaths. I mean, again, like how it's just trying not to die in this country. That's all we do is just like, hey, could I not die in mass shooting, train derailment, toxic chemicals?
We've also long never valued our railways. Like as soon as the highway systems took over, it was like, good luck getting people to care about investing money and time and safety in the railways, because that's not our main mode of transportation or even and even though we use it to get goods around, people don't think about it.
No, right. Exactly. All right. Well, no. We'll continue to follow the story, obviously, but I think it's super important, and a lot of mainstream outlets are not covering it because but it's such a juicy story if you cover it from these angles, if you cover it from the labor angle and you cover it from the political corruption angle, in my opinion. It's not just a tragedy that sort of ends and, begins and ends. There is a lot more to it, but they won't because it's sort of the heat comes down on Biden. We got to move on to the sitch for this week. Perhaps even more depressing than chemical spills or Hunter Biden's D-pics is what's going on in Ukraine. The war continues to rage. We're coming up on a year since the beginning of it. And I want to welcome staff writer for Jacobin, author of Yesterday's Man, The Case Against Joe Biden. Love that. Please welcome Branko Marcetic. Branko.
Thanks for having me.
So good to have you. Thank you for joining us. So you've been doing some great reporting about the war in Ukraine, and you've spoken to a lot of experts and folks and people in the in the I guess intelligence communities and defense sort of defense community. What is the assessment a year into this thing? How do we get out? What can we do? Are we closer to? You had an article titled, basically, we're about to go to, nuclear war is closer than we think. Are we closer to nuclear war? Or are we closer to a diplomatic settlement? That's my question for you. Let's start it up.
I would never say that we should be relaxed about the risk of nuclear war, especially when, we look at the situation in Ukraine where you have this pretty unprecedented situation, basically what is, among other things, a proxy war between two countries that have basically enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world several times over. So that is something that a risk that we should be cognizant of, through this entire war. In terms of what we're closer to, I think we're slowly edging towards a position where some sort of ceasefire maybe maybe on the cards, but it seems like it's still going to be a little while away. I think actually just yesterday, the Washington Post reported that the Biden administration basically told Zelensky, look, these weapons, it's not clear that we're going to be able to keep giving you military aid because Congress is just not as into it anymore as they were when it was a Democratic-controlled Congress. So you gotta get some sort of win and push things towards some sort of resolution here because we're not sure how much longer we're going to be able to support you. Frankly, I think they should have been kind of putting this kind of pressure on Zelensky way before this because that's not just Zelensky's not really the bigger problem. It's the fact that he's surrounded by a lot of people who are much more hardline than him. Zelensky has always been more inclined to negotiations than the people around him. Really? But regardless, yeah. And that's been something that's been pretty ignored by mainstream reporting. Zelensky early in the war was saying, he wanted the West to take more of a role in negotiations with Russia. Even after Bucha, the massacre of Bucha was discovered, which obviously, is a horrific war crime, and was something that really hurt the chance for peace talks. Even then, Zelensky was saying, at the end of the day, as terrible as this is, as difficult as it's going to make it, this is, talks and negotiations are the only way this war is going to end. Unfortunately, that stuff has been ignored. So, I think now there is finally a move to push things in this direction. Unfortunately, if it had been started months ago, the thousands of lives that could have been saved, and so much else, it's crazy to think about.
Just a little bit of a roundup. What's going on now? 90,000 Russians are estimated to have been killed, soldiers and civilians. I don't know the numbers on Ukraine, but the casualties have been much larger on the Russian side because Russia's effectively losing. General Maximillien today the chairman of America's Joint Chiefs of Staff said that Russia has lost strategically, operationally, and tactically. So it's kind of like all over, but the crying or whatnot. What is it? All over, but anyway, the fat lady's about to sing is what I'm saying. If I can mix every single metaphor I've ever learned. But so that it's kind of like how to manage Putin's insanity, given that he is losing this war. Is that correct?
I would be a little more careful about that. I mean, at the moment, the situation on the battlefield is kind of reversed. I mean, Ukraine had that offensive where they reclaimed a bunch of territory, I think that should have been the moment. I mean, I think it should have been even earlier than that. But when this war was dragged out, that could have been a good moment to move into talks because Ukraine was at a good position. But at that point, the discourse in both the United States and other Western countries and in Ukraine shifted towards not, getting to a position of negotiating strength, but actually going further now, militarily winning the war. And so that moment was missed. And then what's happened now, actually, Russia has been gaining, very, very small and incrementally, but has been gaining in terms of some territorial conquests in the Donbass. Meanwhile, German intelligence a month or two ago disclosed that they thought their assessment was that Ukraine was losing men in the triple figures every single day. I mean, so what that means, could be 100, could be 900. But that is a staggering amount. And I mean, the battlefield losses, again, as you said, it's not clear what exactly they are. But there are the estimates among, the United States and other NATO partners have them at about, six figures for each country. So somewhere over 100,000 for each. Now, that's bad for Russia. I mean, those are catastrophic losses if you compare them to, say, how much the US lost over just its 20-year invasion of Afghanistan. Sure. But for Ukraine, it's even worse. I mean, Ukraine before the war had a population that was about a third of Russia's. Right. It's now even smaller because 7-8 million people have fled. So that's a much worse situation. And then you add on top of that the fact that the Ukrainian economy is really only running because of constant foreign aid that's propping it up. I think its GDP contracted by something like 40% over the last year, whereas Russia, it's suffered from sanctions, but its economy has defied expectations about what was going to happen. So I mean, overall,
you mean the sanctions didn't work?
Yeah, surprisingly, sanctions yet again failed to actually dislodge someone from power and ultimately just increased the suffering of ordinary people in those countries. Yeah, I mean, I think what it looks like it's going to happen, from all indications and from the reporting we have. And, I mean, I want to stress that I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but this is just what it seems like.
No, I will hold you to this.
Yeah. Please call me out. Yeah, when this ends up being proven wrong. Well, I mean, it looks like Russia's going to make some gains now. Then Ukraine, and it's going to make a major offensive. Who knows what's going to come of that? And then Ukraine will launch another counteroffensive. And it seems like after that, basically, there's going to be a concerted push to just work things out at the negotiating table. But I mean, in that time frame, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of carnage that I don't really particularly want to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Between now and then, it's just what's interesting. Also, speaking of predictions, the last time we really talked about Ukraine, I had Anatol Levin on the show, who was on maybe a week before the war started, saying that he thought the war was never going to start and that we were sort of overblowing it. And it turned out, Biden and the intelligence that he received was correct. We thought it was a lot of bluster, but instead it wasn't. And so I hear you on there's on the horizon, there could be a ceasefire, but I'm very, aware of just the lengths at which Putin will go to, especially when losing and when backed in a corner, which I believe, your work and writing around the nuclear option speaks to that, and it seems like Biden might also know that, dude is unstable. Putin's unstable. If he's losing, we need to somehow, it can't just be backing him into a corner. There's got to be some sort of off ramp.
Well, certainly, if and when the Ukrainian military launches their counteroffensive, and if it is successful, that is something that's going to have to be managed. That the US will have to say, well, there are lines that you cannot cross here, because I mean the reason that Russia has a nuclear arsenal and the size of nuclear arsenal it has is because of its weakness in conventional military, and so that it has this kind of horrendous and nightmarish, but an ace in the hole nonetheless, where it can use its weapons if it's really cornered. So you're right, that is something that's going to have to be managed. In terms of the the predictions around when the war was going to start, I mean, I have to say I was skeptical too. I thought a invasion would happen if negotiations failed to take place over basically what Putin was putting on the table. But I did not think it was going to be kind of the size and scale that it ended up being. That was a real surprise. But I think it is worth mentioning that, I mean, we get piecemeal insights into what US intelligence or Western intelligence actually is. And we don't see firsthand evidence of this. We get told to it by officials, or officials launder it through the press, through anonymous statements. I mean, I think it's important to note that some months after the war started, senior intelligence officials and former intelligence officials told James Risen at The Intercept, he's a very veteran national security reporter, that that the CIA had actually concluded that over December and January, Putin had actually not decided to invade, and it was only in February they made the decision to invade. I mean, I don't know when you had Anatol on, but I mean, to me, what that points to is that, again, if the Biden administration had not rejected talks over limiting NATO's expansion in January and December, as it did, I mean, it's hard to we can't know for sure, but there's a good chance that this entire war could have been avoided. And why they chose not to do that, I don't know. I don't know if it was a fear of looking weak, of being attacked. Who knows? But I mean, I think whatever short-term cost that might have taken, the long-term costs of actually having this war take place have been far, far worse.
When you say you like, so there'll be another push from Russia and then another push back from Ukraine. Is that just Ukraine, or would that be Ukraine and friends?
Well, I mean, NATO has been very careful around not. Well, no, I don't want to say very careful, but they have as a priority, at least nominally, not to cross certain lines to get involved in the war. Because if NATO gets involved in the war, I mean, NATO is an alliance of well over a dozen states that would lead to World War III.
I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, are we on the cusp? Are we gonna go ahead there?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question. It's a question not a lot of people are asking. Horrifically, I mean, it's a topic that's been completely, ignored until Putin made those threats in October. But the amount of, or rather the small amount that this occupies in kind of discourse really alarms me. I mean, here's the problem: the Biden administration and NATO governments all say they don't want World War III because, of course, it would be completely irrational.
Too good for the economy. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, no one wants to. Even the elite, the ruling class in these various governments, they don't want to die in some sort of nuclear hailstorm. But it's one thing to say, well, we don't want to do this, but quite another thing to actually stop it from happening. I mean, World War I, no one necessarily wanted to go into World War I, but events can take a momentum of their own, and leaders can sometimes, feel that they don't have any other choice but to end up taking what end up being catastrophic decisions. And one of the things I wrote recently for Responsible Statecraft at the Quincy Institute was just how all of these lines that the Biden administration had drawn, not just early in the war, but even since, have just been blown past. They said we're not going to have troops in the ground. Apparently, there's special forces in Ukraine right now. Reportedly, the CIA has been helping some other NATO government spy service carry out sabotage attacks within Russia. I mean, that is very close to direct hostility.
Oh my God! Next we'll fly balloons in their airspace.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds a
Oh, I
lot
mean-
like Grandpa being like, "No candy," and then sneaking some under the table, for the kids, right?
Well, and don't even get me started on the balloon stuff, which is, the overreaction to that has been kind
No,
of.
but special operations inside of Russia is insane. I mean,
Yes.
that's next level.
Yeah, and I mean, the weaponry, the type of weaponry that they said that they wouldn't send. They Biden said initially, we're not sending any heavy weaponry, and then within a month or two, they started sending it. Actually, the Ukrainian defense minister, soon to be gone, but he talked about this, almost boasted about it to the New Yorker and the Washington Post. He said at the start of this war, I was told you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have tanks, you can't have jets.
Okay,
all
a
of
little
that.
as a treat.
Yeah.
and aside from the jets, he's right. All of those lines ended up being crossed.
That's
and
right.
So the question is, at what point do certain other lines get crossed? Not because the best of intentions aren't being aren't involved here from Western governments, but just because of the momentum and the logic of mission creep.
Well,
I think that's
you
a
were
really
saying- So sorry. I was just going to say, you were saying that Putin hadn't made his decision until right before it. So it sounds like there's a lot of just flying by the seat of the pants with hundreds of thousands of people's lives in the balance.
Yeah, and I mean, not even hundreds of thousands. I mean, if it was a nuclear war between the US and Russia, I mean, we're looking at potentially
Everybody.
millions. Everybody. I mean,
we're doing it to ourselves though now with all of our toxic chemicals exploding.
That's right.
We're like, Putin, yo, look, you don't even.
Yeah,
we
it's
got
like,
this.
If you live in New York, you may as well smoke, right? Because you're already getting that amount of. Okay, anyway. Sorry.
I mean, it's really hard for me as like a leftist, an internationalist, someone who's believes that there should be international law and that other countries should not invade their neighbors. And of course, this goes for the United States and their history as well, not invading necessarily neighbors, but wars for resources. It's hard to know which line to take around this because I do believe that there should be a supporting of the Ukrainian people, right? And there should be a way to do that without bolstering the war machine. And I believe someone like Ilhan Omar has articulated that in terms of we don't want to write a blank check to Ukraine forever and ever and ever. Then she gets hounded for that stance and kind of lumped in with some of the isolationist Republicans who are against sending money to Ukraine and weapons to Ukraine, but for completely, again, isolationist, xenophobic, almost also, let's be real, a little bit pro-Putin reasons, a little bit soft on Russia. I mean, Trump is like, this would have never happened under me because I would have just let
crushed
Putin
everybody with my weight.
Exactly. Just give it to him. Ukraine's so small. That's what would have happened. So it's hard to know, where we can stand in solidarity, but also against endless war and obviously against nuclear war.
No, I mean, these are not easy questions to answer. This is not a simple topic. I think there's a lot of room for debate here. But I think the one place that U.S. politicians that Americans themselves could have pressured their lawmakers, had they been informed about what was really going on throughout this war, is in pushing for the United States to take a more diplomatic first approach to this, and also to say that they wanted the war to end as soon as possible. I mean, one thing that people are not aware of, this was revealed in a partly in a recent interview with the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who was involved in some of the mediating for peace talks between Ukraine and Russia early in the war. And he said outright that, basically maybe powers like France and Germany wanted the war to end very quickly, in the first month or so, and were supportive of the peace talks that were happening between Putin and Zelensky. And there were breakthroughs between those two men that could have led to an end of the war. But leadership like the UK's Boris Johnson and the US Biden, they did not want the war to end, and they blocked those peace talks, so they stopped those peace talks. This is a former prime minister who just revealed this, and he's not the only one. I mean, this is corroborated by other things. We had Fiona Hill, a former Trump and Bush national security official. Not a dove on Russia whatsoever. And she said in Foreign Affairs last year that there had been some sort of tentative agreement reached between the two sides in March and April. And what happened then? I mean, we learned also from Ukrainska Pravda, which is a Ukrainian paper. It's by no means aligned with Russia or anything like that. They reported that in early April, as it seemed like maybe the two sides have figured out some sort of way to end this war, and it was agreeable to both. Boris Johnson flew down to Kiev out of nowhere and said, anything that you sign, we are not going to recognize because we think Putin is weaker than he seemed, and you should keep pressing him. And I mean, if people, that all of these reports have almost been completely ignored by Western reporting, but if people knew about this, perhaps there would have been more of a push to make.
Well, we remember we
cared
about Fiona Hill when she was speaking about the call that, I believe this is her, the call that Trump made to Zelensky, trying to lean on him for dirt on Biden. I believe she was part of the entire first impeachment hearing. So it was like, all of her like incredible, she was sort of lauded. And I think that was her. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm getting my
she was
people
involved,
mixed up. But yeah, it's like we were so curious about this situation when it came to like, getting Trump. But now when it comes to Biden, we're I guess my question for you on the Putin stuff is, Zelensky has recently said, and I think that's fascinating, that he is from the East. He's from Eastern Ukraine, which is, is he from a territory that's currently being held by Putin now? I'm not sure, but I know that he's like always seen that border as like, more fluid, and he believes that they're brothers, and like there's, he ultimately has said things like, my brothers in Russia, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of Putin, he has said that he wants there to be regime change, that he wants Putin to step down, that's how he sees this ending. How that there's no chance in hell that's going to happen without an actual all-out war.
I mean, it would be very difficult. It would. I don't know what would require. Perhaps it would require, Putin really losing the war.
Right.
But again, I mean, that creates an incentive for Putin to escalate things to an alarming degree, because if it means his own life is potentially threatened,
right,
then who knows what he might threaten in that situation. I mean, the other thing about when I hear this conversation about regime change in Russia, I mean, I wonder to myself, have people just completely forgotten, the last 20 years? When in recent history has regime change led to the kind of outcomes that Western officials and maybe even Western publics have thought it was going to lead to? I mean, in Libya, it led to anarchy and slave markets in the public. I mean, in Iraq, it led to civil war and instability. Afghanistan.
But in France, no more Marie Antoinette. That's what we're going for.
Well, and it would do, I mean, people seem to think that the person who would follow Putin in some sort of regime change operation would be some sort of dove or a pro-Western person. And there's no real reason to believe that that's true at all. In fact, it's very likely, I mean, if you got rid of the Russian leader, that in fact what would happen is that jingoism and militarism would be further inflamed in Russia, and sort of a drive for revenge. And you get someone who was far, far worse than Putin, who's maybe willing to do things that even Putin himself is not willing to do. So I think people need to really think through some of these ideas that they throw around.
No, I feel like when we jostled Afghanistan around, everything worked out great.
Yeah, exactly. Just shake the risk board.
Can I have a question also. When this was all started, I host a podcast for the BBC World Service, and when this was all starting, I was working with them. So I was spending all day with a bunch of BBC guys from England, and the the idea of why this was happening, the messaging that they were getting from the news that they were exposed to was completely different from the messaging that we've gotten. It was so much about like resources and some about like the history of Ukraine and NATO. And we were getting so much messaging about Putin's crazy and he has a childhood love personally of the Ukraine. And just hearing you talk about the idea that they have sat down at the table and things had gotten better at certain points and then it's got worse at certain points. How much of this is a calculated chess game that has to do with like motivations about money and resources and power, and how much of it is narcissism and being lunatics?
How much time do we got?
Like, I honestly feel like that's what we are told over and over in the media, that it's just a bunch of crazies can't do anything. There's no way to sit down.
Not as strategic as what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I think that this casting of Putin as just this kind of madman, and he's Hitler and so on and so forth. I think it's misleading, but it's also very irresponsible, because what the idea is, what people are trying to say when that happens is there can be no talks and negotiations. There can be no peaceful settlement to this. You can only, Hitler was not going to compromise. He was someone who had to be militarily defeated. And that's what this narrative serves. And I don't think that's true. I just don't think it's borne out by the evidence. I mean, and as for the cause of the war, there's always a million causes. And I think, there's some of Putin's own personal pride and some in the way that he was kind of rebuffed by Bush and successive US governments involved. I think there's Russia's kind of pretensions to being a great power. It's loss of status after Cold War. I think that definitely plays a role. I think also some domestic stuff plays a role. But this idea that we have been fed in the United States and other countries that the policy of NATO expansion and Western foreign policy over the past 30 years has nothing to do with what's going on is absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, to see how ridiculous it is, you only have to look at, even the Washington Post reported, when they were doing the big write-up based on all Ukrainian and US sources about the lead up to the war. They had multiple Russian officials quoted in there, and not people lower down, but then also Putin himself saying directly, the reason that we're building these troops up and basically threatening to invade is because of NATO expansion, including that's what Putin reportedly said to Biden directly. So it's just not credible. I'm sorry. I mean, and there's a reason. Naftali Bennett, by the way, in that interview said the same thing, that the war was about NATO. That's what Putin told him. You could go down. I could go on for probably an hour and a half.
It's a flex. I mean, and when I say that Putin's crazy, because I did say that, and I think a lot of people say that, it's not he's crazy, therefore you have to just depose, topple, go full military. It's he's crazy, so he'll do anything. So be very careful with who you're dealing with, and probably look for off ramps, looks for ways to de-escalate. And it seems like, even though I think what you said that really struck a chord with me was, obviously how many wars have been necessarily deliberate, like eyes wide open. Like so many times people stumble, bumble, and are led into world wars. But that Biden ultimately has had a lot of these red lines crossed and hasn't necessarily escalated or done something dramatic. Yes, they've gotten more weaponry, but it's almost like I think they know who they're dealing with, and they know that maybe they need to bring this person to the table and not leave them only the nuclear option. I guess last question about NATO. What happens after this, if and when?
Yeah, that's a good question.
We shut it down. It's probably ready to. No,
I don't think. Unfortunately, I don't think that's gonna. The time to shut NATO down. I think eventually.
20 years ago.
Yeah, it was 30 years ago when the Cold War ended. I mean, that's so much of the story of why we're here. I mean, this idea that this is just a kind of Putin talking point or whatever is ridiculous. I mean, there have been dozens upon dozens of American and other Western officials and experts, including the father of the Cold War policy of containment, George Kennan, including Biden's own CIA director, including Mikhail Gorbachev, who was just last year upon his death celebrated in the Western press as this great man, a great Democrat, someone who was the opposite of Putin.
Right.
All of these people warned repeatedly about the dangers of keeping this military alliance going after the Cold War, because what it signaled to this, weakened, newly weakened Russia, was that actually the Cold War had not ended, that the United States and the Western governments behind it were keeping it going. And it elicited exactly the reaction that all of these people predicted, that there was a rise in Russian nationalism, that there was a rise in Russian militarism, that there was this deep resentfulness among the Russian elite, and even not just the elite, the population too. And that is so much a story about the story of what's going on now. And the reason that it's important to know this, I think unfortunately this whole thing has been kind of framed around moral condemnation. Who's more to blame than the other person? And that is not really the pertinent thing here. The pertinent thing is similar to after September 11. What happened? Everyone said, well, these people just hate us for for our freedoms. They're just evil. They just want to commit suffering and crimes, and that's it. It has nothing to do with Western foreign policy and US foreign policy at all. And what did we do? For decades, we continued on the same path, doing the same things that fed the exact resentment and anger that led to that crime and so many others. It took us a long time to realize, actually, no, there is a role that US foreign policy plays in this, and it's important to actually reorient foreign policy around that. Right. And my worry is if we continue to just tell ourselves, oh, this is completely nothing to do with past recent history of US foreign policy and even policy under Biden and Trump, this is all just because Putin's evil and he's an imperialist and that's all there is to it, we're going to keep making the same mistakes, and the world is going to be far less safe as a result. So I think we really need to talk about this and be able to be mature adults and say, yes, the war is bad, but we also have to understand what role the actions of our governments played in making it happen, so that we can avoid making this happen again.
Yes,
I agree.
Absolutely. I agree. That's a great way to end it. And I just want to say, I do think this is work that should have begun way long ago. That I also feel like, under Obama, the red lines around Crimea, it's like, yeah, it's one thing to oust diplomats, which is good, but like, what are you doing? What else are you doing? You can't, we are also painting ourselves into a military corner. So anyway, thank you so much, Branko, for breaking that down. I apologize if, we're coming into this kind of cold. It's been a while and it feels like, the malaise of just like, well, I haven't really been following. How many dead on this side? How many, it gets to you. So I appreciate you explaining it. And I'd love to have you back for some updates as well. Do you want to stay on for a dumb final segment?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Hell yeah.
That's an interesting story.
It was a great story, guys, because it's fucking Valentine's Day and no one's getting laid. That's right. New York Times opinion essay, have more sex, please. This is a journalist who, I don't know her name. Anyway, she writes about sex and how nobody's having it. Apparently, more than a quarter of Americans hadn't had sex even once in the past year, the last time the General Social Survey asked in 2021. This was the highest such level of sexlessness in the survey's history. That's not fair because it was the pandemic. And it still is.
That's bananas.
But apparently it had been going that way. Okay, the figure includes almost 30% of men under 30, a figure that has tripled since 2008. So there you go. Women in 2021, roughly a quarter of women under 35 reported having no sex in the past year. For men, the figure was 19%, and women who are having sex are less likely to be happy with the sex they're having. That's a whole other conversation. Both men and women report feelings of regret and unhappiness following casual sex. It's more common among women, probably in part because of cultural perceptions of sexual autonomy. Sex can bring people together, but that only works when it's good sex. Also, anatomy. You know what I'm saying? You got to put in the work, y'all. Kind of put in the work.
That's my question. I mean, it seems to indicate that they're self-reporting, but also, what is their definition of sex? Like, it just says sex. That are they talking about?
Like unhappy? You mean the unhappy part, or like, am I having
just having sex? Do they mean like penetrative heterosexual sex? Do they mean oral sex? Do they mean like what are they including under the banner of This seems like
Yeah,
one of those studies
yeah.
that's like, what's the science here?
Nobody's having
show
sex,
me the
but
science.
everyone's eating ass. So like, are we
Exactly.
It's
So
nothing
celebrate
but
it.
exactly
That's
eating
safe
ass.
in COVID.
If you guys needed a reminder, first of all, I've heard this in other places too. So I see what you're doing, Eliza, but we all know no one's having sex. And if you need a reminder, sex is good for you. Lack of sex can easily translate into less socialization, fewer families, and a sicker population. Sex reduces pain, relieves stress, improves sleep, lowers blood pressure, and strengthens heart health. Honey. I just add that. That's what's going to happen tonight. Honey, it strengthens your heart health. Get over here. Okay, so, but I have heard this, that like, especially young people are having less sex. It's Valentine's Day, so we're going to fix this problem for this country, guys. If we were to be given, let's say you're given a few $1 million to roll out a campaign, what would it be to get people to fuck again? This is Just Do It. Okay, what are we doing? What is the solution? I could go first.
Okay, go for it.
I haven't put a lot of thought into this, but I definitely feel like it's sort of full circle to our first conversation about Penn Badgley. I kind of want to see celebrities having sex.
You want high-end porn, Hollywood porn.
I want Hollywood porn. None of this deep fake BS. We need more NC-17 stuff. Look, Clooney and Roberts, they're in a rom-com. Let's see them doing it. I don't need your cute little one-liners. I mean, I also need that. Kushner and Witherspoon are in a new rom-com. Let's see them naked. I want to let's go to town on this. I think that would absolutely help. That's what we all want. Like, I mean, that's what I want. When I see a rom-com, I'm like, but can they do it? Can they just do it? I also think sex therapists should be talking like every night, like instead of like Skinamax or like no we don't need more porn, but we need more people talking about sex. Like, you know, Dr. Ruth, like who's by the way 94 right now, German sex therapist, 94, Holocaust survivor. So what have you done with your life? I just want her to like talk about like the clitoris, you know, like she would probably say clitoris, but like I want her to show like the different, you know, the chamber here, you stimulate, like that should be nightly viewing. We should learn how to give better head, have better sex. Like I think that like tips, that's what we need. Final thought, just like this is your brain on drugs, it should be this is your brain on sex. And it's just like a fucking omelet of eggs, just like hell yeah, it's amazing, it's delicious.
I have a different theory.
Okay.
I think that we've actually gotten too much actual sex. Like since Pornhub and we got free streaming porn online, it's like a fire hose of sex that is available to people constantly. And I think the problem is not like people don't know what to do once they're having sex. It's that they're not wanting to have sex. So I think we gotta work on the sexiness.
Ooh, like romance.
Yeah, well, not even romance, because you can be sexy without being romantic. I would suggest a series of PSAs, real sexy, showing all kinds of different people be really confident and talk about something that they find fascinating and just like make them look like a fascinating person. You know, you light them right, you give them some like key lights, basically make like everybody look like what's his name, the most fascinating man in the world,
right?
But they're like
fascinating,
I want to tell you about my water purification system or my magic cards or whatever. So people can see something that makes them feel like something about them that's just normal could be sexy. And also they're getting kind of turned on by weird normal people. Right. Because I think capitalism has ruined sex because it has limited what people think they are supposed to be attracted to. It's become this thing where it's like, this is like Ashton Kutcher is the hot man and whatever, Blake Lively is the hot lady, and that's what we're supposed to want. And it's not what people naturally want. And so I think people are just like aren't in connecting with the parts of them, their butts and their guts that like get them horny. And I think we got to wake
Their
that
butts
back
and
up.
their gut.
You
Just
know what I
like,
mean?
yes. Yeah. Like tight
Like
shot on like
internally.
someone's like real thighs, and then just be like, I have eczema. You know, like that.
Well,
kind
maybe
of-
not the worst things about them, but just as I said, things that they find fascinating. I think when people talk about stuff that they find interesting, I think that's the best place I find to crew and to key into anyone's charisma.
God, that's such a woman thing to say. That is what turns us on. What turns me on is just someone who's passionate about what they do, or like someone kind of smart. You know what I'm saying? Like I've been turned on the whole time that you were talking about Ukraine, Branko. Sorry, I'm totally fucking with you.
Well, let me give you a very meat and potatoes answer for what I think. I mean, well, number one, first of all, we could maybe take a page out of whatever they did to get the pandas having sex again.
Yeah, they watch porn.
Isolate them with just
I think
one
they
other
did.
panda.
Yeah, they did have panda porn, yeah. But I mean, and you know, I agree that probably our society's unhealthy relationship with porn is probably, you know, is part of the culprit here. But also, I mean, you know, to me, very telling detail in that piece that you read out was, you know, it's tripled since 2008. What happened in 2008? You had a economic crisis. People's living standards, you know, went back severely. And I mean, you know, if you want to have sex, I mean, what does that involve? You don't just call someone up and say, "Hey, come over, I want to have sex." Some people can do that, you know, but for most people, you know, you need to have a house. You need to have a place that you can take them to. You need to be able to afford dinner or a movie or going out. Or,
you don't always need a mattress though, and I've made that mistake.
There are definitely innovations there that you can do, but you know, I mean, generally you need some sort of roof over your head, right? And I mean, all of these things in the society that we live in cost money, and so I think that's a big part of it. So you know, I would say, one, I would need a lot more than just a few $1 million. You know, I would say we need to build affordable housing. We need to be able to, you know, give people jobs, perhaps through a federal job guarantee, perhaps through some sort of massive green infrastructure investment that you know, creates really good union and good paying jobs.
We need a love stimulus, is what you're saying.
I love that.
Like a stimulus.
I agree, and also all of those things create internal confidence. Like people feel proud enough about themselves that they can approach other people and feel sexy about themselves and be like, I would be fun for this person, instead of being like, I'm a weirdo and I sleep on a towel. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, while you're at it, why not fund, you know, give money to state and local governments to set up events. You know, I mean, you could do something as outlandish as having a kind of government funded kind of speed dating thing, or you could have people, you know, I mean, where do people meet? They meet at shows, they meet at I don't know, festivals.
Have a festival.
More places for Proud Boys to show up armed. I'm kidding. Well, obviously, we're imagining a world that doesn't exist right now. No, funny story. I did a Nat Geo piece for the show Explorer, and the Japanese government is having a terrible time of getting people to procreate and have kids. And so they do like speed dating, like set up by local governments. And it's adorable, and it was very cute. And they have like, there was like a little mascot. It was like a small town. We could totally do that here. I just think in general, like, you have to feel sexy. For me, you got to be a little bit relaxed, and a lot of bit relaxed if you actually want to, you know, finish. And it's very difficult to be relaxed when you're thinking about climate chaos, impending doom.
So ignore the news. Yes.
Exactly. Just thinking. Yes, exactly. Turn off this podcast right now and go have sex. If you're within the sound of my voice. But no, exactly. You're like, there's so many worries in general, and also turning off your brain after being so overstimulated, not just by pornography, but like information, your phone in general. Sex is kind of one of those only times where we're like, sometimes you got music on, but it might be kind of quiet. It might be kind of lovely. It might be kind of like still. Things might be slower. And we're just not used to that anymore.
Yeah. I think also another kind of both of those points, we're being overstimulated, and it would be great if we had like block parties or whatever. We just don't speak to people in public. I think that if people started socializing in public again, like we can now,
Right.
we're not having to isolate as much. You should know your neighbors. I'm not saying you're gonna fuck your neighbors, but if you know them, then you will start knowing the people at the
At
coffee
least
shop,
you could.
and then you will
yeah.
start knowing their friends, and then you will meet real people. Like, we've become so reliant on dating apps and on the
Yeah.
internet in general for all forms of socializing, and it doesn't really do the same things to our brains. We think it does, but it doesn't.
I talked to the guy in the Trader Joe's checkout line. Like, I talked to the cashier about Pico de Gallo, and like 30 seconds in, I was like, "Are we fucking
Best
right now?" Like, I was there.
Yeah.
There was like three sentences exchanged. I was like, "I'm pretty sure we're boyfriend and girlfriend because I haven't spoken to a stranger like this in forever."
Yeah, we've gotten so used to these curated bubbles online that we're like, you weren't excuse me, stranger on the street, you weren't part of an algorithm assigned to me.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in mating your dog, you know?
But to me, I mean, that's such a part of the story, right? Is just the way that we've all become much more isolated and atomized over the past however many decades. There is less of a communal life, communal experiences that we experience through social groups. It's all just become an individual thing. So yeah, I mean, I think in general, putting down your phone as much as you can, getting off the computer as much as you can, to the extent that you can, is always good. Not just for the potential of having sex at one point, but also just generally, I mean, it's just healthier for you. These things do not do good things to our brain.
No.
And I say that as someone who is very reliant on all this technology. I'm very aware, horrifically aware, actually, of what it does to my brain when I'm using it.
Have you read Stolen Focus?
I haven't.
It's pretty great. And it's about how our ability to pay attention and to focus on things, to read books, to all that stuff that we used to do so easily has been eroded, but by so many different aspects of society. Because I feel like a lot of the messaging that I've gotten about what you're saying, like we should be off our phones, we end up kind of blaming ourselves and being like, I was on my phone too much. I'm such an idiot. And it just makes it harder, as opposed to recognizing like there are so many factors working very hard to encourage us to keep picking up those phones. It's not even just social media. It's so many things.
Yep.
Anyway, that's my
Bo-
rant.
Bo-
It's a good
Bo-
book.
No, I mean,
Bo Burnham
that's
had
a
like
big-
a whole thing where he was like, all they're doing is vying for our attention, and it's like, you're right, and I'm one of them. Please.
Well, and they're trying to make us little workers and little consumers.
Yeah. Well, and
Speaking
I mean,
Uh-huh.
I'll just say very quickly. I mean, there's no reason that phones and the like social media, all these things have to be designed the way that they're designed. They're designed specifically to keep us addicted. I mean, you can imagine a type of cell phone or a smartphone that doesn't necessarily, make you just kind of keep coming back and back and back. I think there's other ways to do this.
Right, it will
And
shut down if
one of
you're
the-
on
Yeah,
it.
who knows?
One of these examples in the book is like, why isn't Facebook, for instance, why doesn't that alert you when there are people in your area who you're friends with and you could have lunch with? Like, it could be a very functional part of that, but it would get you off of the app. So it's like, even these ideas of social media could be helping us, but
You got to earn
decide
social
not to.
media time by spending in person time. Does that make sense? Be like, oh, cool, I've got credits because I, talked to the dude about Pico de Gallo. Now I can scroll Instagram for 15 minutes. Branko, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and follow your work?
I mean, you can find me on Twitter, B Marcetic, with H's after the C's. You can find me at Jacobin, where I'm a staff writer. I also write for In These Times, which is a great progressive magazine in Chicago, and
Indeed.
about a bunch of other places. Yeah,
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Take very good care. Come back soon. And Eliza Skinner, we have a little bit more show talking about little workers, the littlest workers. Just a quick bonus for the patrons. But in the meantime, where can people find you and follow your work?
I'm on Twitter at Eliza Skinner. I'm on Instagram at @eskins. And I'm kind of secretly on TikTok at Eliza and Boo. It's mostly videos of my dog. He is alive. Boo.
The dog in the background, by the way, if people
Yeah, he's
listening,
still alive.
is just a straight Jim Henson Muppet.
Yes, and you can also watch my Jim Henson show, Earth to Ned, on Disney Plus.
Amazing. Incredible. Thank you so much for joining me. Take very good care. And thank you all for being here. Obviously, rolling with these stories, some heavy ones, some light ones. Hope you're all, if you're not already just mid-thrust right now. That was gross. But Serge Heitko says socialism is when no Beyonce tickets, smiley face. Thank you. I appreciate that tongue-in-cheek joke. I'm sure I was getting hate for it, and I do get hate for it. But did I randomly click pay on 2 seats? I have no idea where they are located. Yeah, that's what happened. Because I was focused on the show, y'all. Let's see. Cyborg F Gaming on Twitch. Coco, tits or get the fuck out. Internet basics. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's how you do well on Twitch generally. Although, I guess you're not supposed to these days. Gary Cooper. To be fair, even if it just happened to one woman, everybody in Antarctica would know about it. There aren't many people there, so they all run into each other. Indeed. Awkward. Martin on YouTube. New York Post owned by Rupert Murdoch now. Coincidentally sitting with Elon in his box at the Super Bowl. Yeah. If this had happened, if the hearing had happened after the Super Bowl, I feel like AOC would have mentioned it. But the subtext around her testimony and her line of questioning was also like, you guys are throwing down with this billionaire because you believe that the platform is rigged against you, and of course it's not. And this billionaire is on your side, and that's why you love him, and that's it. And yeah, these guys are mainstream news, and they consistently tell you they're not. They're gaslighting us, and that term is used very aptly here. They're gaslighting us into saying, no, I'm not mainstream media. Oh yeah, the big tech is biased against me. I love how they think tech is like biased against the right wing just because there's like women and people of color who work in tech. Oh, it's based in California. Whoa. Like, no. Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, they're still crushing it on the numbers. Steven Crowder, they're still number 1. JP says, we're so fortunate to at least have an AOC to witness the horrors of the GOP. Yes, AOC is my Beyonce. What? Camperman 5000. I got distracted by Boo waking up. Speaking of Eliza's dog, Martin says, Eliza's dog is super chill. Fat guy named Tiny on Twitch, 380 times as much on average. I don't know what that is in reference to. That I think that is about train derailments. Thank you so much, Robert, for the super chat. If a corporation kills people, it should go down. Absolutely, if only. Oh, 380 times. That was CEO to worker pay. Willie Gus says, social support is sexy. Camperman 5000, give everyone free weed and a love stimulus. Problem solved. Gary Cooper, what does a speed dating mascot look like? Oh, very cute. It was like it was a giant vagina. No, it was not. It was like a wife and a husband, little like Japanese dolls. I forgot their names. And with that, y'all, thank you so much for being supporters of the show. You know what time it is. It's time. Do we have any new patrons at $10? I don't think so. Fart song. Thank you so much. One of the things that I forgot was to open up my Twitch. But thank you so much to the big tippers, Sarah Osmond, who tipped on Cash App. I appreciate you. And to all of the people who resubbed on Twitch, I will get to you next week. Your girl forgot to open up that window, so maybe. Everyone can become patrons. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Again, you get access to the bonus content. We're talking about child labor laws being obliterated in the year 2023 because we need more worker bees. Yes, this is happening. Is it happening in your state? We'll get into it. Y'all, we stream every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and Twitch. Thank you to Paige Oamek, to Maximillien Inhoff, and to Andy Vasoyan, the editor. Follow the show, Twitter, Bitchuation Pod, TikTok, and Instagram, and I guess that's it. At Franny Fio. And remember, fight the power, fuck the patriarchy, and don't just be about it, bitch about it, Beyonce about it. Bye-bye.